Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Eugene Stepanov. I'm a part of the marketing team at Perficient, and I'm very excited that you've joined us for today's webinar, in which we'll discuss raising the bar with real-time pharmacovigilance surveillance. Before we move on to a brief overview of Perficient, I'd like to cover some basic housekeeping items. All participants on this call are in listen-only mode, which means that everyone is on mute. You can submit questions to the speaker at any time today by typing them in the Q&A feature. Please make sure that you state your questions clearly and keep in mind that other webinar participants will not see who asked which questions. Your questions to the speaker will be anonymously addressed as time allows towards the end of the presentation. If you still have unanswered questions after the webinar or would like to request information about our services, feel free to reach out to our speaker today, Kari Blaho-Owens, directly. I'll put her information in the chat box in just a little bit. You can also fill out the Contact Us form on Perficient's website. Please note that today's webinar is being recorded and will be sent to you within several days. A link to the slides will also be included. All right, a little bit about Perficient. We are a consulting firm that delivers digital experience, business optimization, and industry solutions. The work we do helps cultivate and captivate customers, as well as drive efficiency and productivity. We have numerous locations across the US and Europe, as well as offshore facilities in India, China, and Mexico. Founded in 1997, we're a public company that's traded on the NASDAQ, and we have more than 3,500 employees. We formed strategic partnerships with major technology vendors and also have dedicated solution and industry practices. One of these practices is, of course, life sciences. This graphic shows our depth of experience. You can see that we have relationships with 30 of the world's largest public life sciences companies. And here are a handful of our clients. All right, now that I've covered the housekeeping items and told you a little bit about Perficient, I'd like to turn it over to today's speaker, Kari Blaho-Owens.
Thanks, Eugene. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I know it's very early on the West Coast, and it's probably late in your day if you're calling in from the EU, but we really appreciate y'all joining us. So today we have just really a couple goals. One is to just identify some of the challenges that all of us face when we are trying to do safety surveillance or analyze the increasing amount of PV data. Just to give you a little background for me, I'm even though Perficient is a very technical company, I am not the technical person. I laugh with my team and tell them that I'm the technology toddler. My background is from pharma and from CRO, from working in the CRO. So I've been sitting on the other side of the table trying to figure out for many years what are some best practices and what would I really want if I were looking to be able to easily survey my data and to quickly identify trends and work them up if they were potential signals. So I'm super excited to show this to you because this is something that I would have, I think if you read any of the posts that I've put out lately, I said I would gladly trade local anesthesia and having my wisdom teeth removed. That's how painful that surveillance used to be for me. So some of the things that really make this a very complicated topic and something that's difficult to do is just the sheer amount of data. And we have data coming in from multiple sources. And so what you'll see is a list of things. I won't read them to you. Eugene will send out the slides in a couple days. But the ones that are highlighted in bold are things that PV-Hawk can really help minimize and in some ways take away. It's extremely resource intensive. So we've tried to look at something that an individual can do, and something that can be used across all sectors within your pharmacovigilance system, and even can be shared with others within your organization who may be looking at the data for different reasons. We've really been challenged because there are some solutions out there, but what really has been lacking is an easy, flexible solution that can fit all of those needs, that doesn't take a PhD in statistics or IT to be able to use it. We know that, sorry about that, we know that the new tenants of the GXP regulations, GXP Module 9, and some of the new requirements from FDA that are coming out are making the bar really higher, and that's what we want to address today. EMA is looking for us to have a system in place where we have a high sensitivity and where we can do things quickly. High sensitivity meaning that we're not getting a lot of noise where we have to work up false negatives, and quickly meaning we should not be looking back at a month, or we shouldn't be looking back historically, because we can't change that. And then they're also asking for us to look at the data to compare to other data sources, such as the vigilance data, FDA AERS, and there's a couple other things. I'm excited to show you what it can do. It is a SaaS platform, and it is specifically designed for those of us who do PV data every day. It's extremely user-friendly. I told you I wasn't technical, so it was one of my asks that it be easy to use and be sort of very intuitive. It does fit nicely with any risk management plan, or if you don't have one set up yet, you can use this as a starting point. It is appropriate if you have a multi-vigilance world, and really what I mean when I say that is if your company has devices or combination products, or it has OTC products or cosmetics, PVHawk can deal with all of that kind of data. It gives you the data that's in an aggregated, digested, extremely visual format, so you're able to really hone in on what you're looking for. You don't have to go to the database. Everything is rendered outside of the database, which is very nice. It does give you the ability to overlay your personal, or not your personal, but your company data with comparator data. Right now, we're set up with FDA AERS, and the really remarkable thing about this is two things. Number one is that overlay data. Secondly, your data is almost in near real time. Your data is refreshed every 24 hours, so that when you're looking at your data, you're only looking at data that is maybe a day old. You're able to do drill down functionality, and I'll show you some of that. And basically, I find this to be an empowering solution, not one where I look at it and I get nauseated and I think, oh my God, I'm going to have to learn how to do a whole bunch. So I don't want you to feel like being in a sales in a car place, having to listen to somebody tell you how fabulous the car is and all the features that it does, because really what we want to do is get in the car and we want to drive it. So let's jump right into the demo, because that's really why we're here. But let me set kind of the stage, because for time's sake, what I've done is I've gone in and I've set up, if I were company A, I've already set this up so that we can sort of seamlessly jump to the demo. So I'm company A, I'm a generics company, and I have a whole bunch of products. And because I'm a big company, my signal surveillance, my trending, all of my safety surveillance is broken out by therapeutic area. So my area is non-steroidals and also antihypertensives. And I've tried to pick a couple of drugs that are very mature. So when I get into sort of the little bit of the nerdy pharmacology and I walk through the logistics, that all of this will be familiar to anyone who's been in this field. The way that PVHawk is really set up is a very simple workflow. And I always think of safety surveillance as an inverse pyramid. We start broad and we look for trends and changes in a broad sense, and then we begin to granulate down. And that's the way that PV-Hawk is set up. So we're going to start, we're going to go through the different visual reports that PV-Hawk has, and then I'm going to show you some of the drill down features, and then we can pause for questions, and I'll ask either Eugene or someone to kind of raise their hand if I get to the 45-minute mark on the hour and we're not finished, because I do want to make sure that we have some time for questions if there are. So what we're going to do, let me pop over to PV-Hawk real quick. So when you go, so you'll log into PV-Hawk, you'll choose your products. I've chosen the ones that I'm responsible for safety surveillance, which is celecoxib, ibuprofen, and ramipril. These are fairly mature products, and the first report visualize that comes up looks at the number of cases by the product by year. So let me just familiarize yourself with what the screens are going to look like, because with few exceptions, most of them are going to have a main screen here. They're going to have two lower screens, which will allow you to granulate your data and to look at it more carefully. Down below, you will see all of the report names. So here's where I am. I'm on cases by product. We have a report that shows you the number of adverse events by product, and what makes it nice is these are all in the current MedDRA terminology. So so you will be able to look at things that are not verbatim but have already been coded. And then we have an overlay. That's where we're going to look at our data in comparison today to FDA AERS data. We have a trending report that looks at all of the adverse events and how they have changed over a time period. And then we have a report that looks at cases geographically and where they're originating. And this is really nice, especially if you are like a generics company and you want to make sure that your drugs are not going to an area where you don't want them to. There's several reasons behind this report. Every report has the ability to granulate down very easily right here by years, months, weeks, or days. So if I wanted to look, let's say, at the number of cases by months, I would simply click here, and there we go, and it pops up. That's a lot to look at. So if I go back here, I see there's not really a whole lot going on between 2014 and 2017. Here's where I'm starting to see some spikes in the number of cases. So I want to take a look at those and see what's going on. But before we do that, let me show you a few other things. Your company name would be up here. This will give you the last time your data refreshes. I'm working out of a demo system, so I do want to make sure that everybody is very clear that this is dummy data. This is data that is available in the public realm that has just been loaded into the back end of our demonstration system. But typically you would see that the date timestamp, which would be within 24 hours. And then here have your username and your date and timestamp on when you have actually looked at this. So this is a really good timestamp for you to be able to demonstrate that you actually are looking at the data when you say you are. On the right-hand side, these are the features that I'm most excited about. You have the ability here to control several things. Number one, I see that I'm going from 2014 to 2019, but there's not a whole lot going on. So I may want to change this, and I can use the slider bar, and I can granulate down. Let's say we'll go to 2016. I can change the product name by entering it here. I can pull my company data in, or I can pull in FDA data as well, and that would change when we add vigilance or we use other data sets. I can granulate by adding an indication. So if I wanted to look at, for example, only ibuprofen that was used for dental pain, I can put that indication here and click apply, and then the data would be refreshed. Everything that you put in your granulation down comes from your database. So if you have no cases, for example, where your product has been used for dental pain, nothing would come up and the screen would be blank. I can also look at, so this gives you an idea of what's going on with your drug when it's used for certain indications, or if it's used. You can also add in concomitant medications. If I'm looking for drug interactions, let's say, for example, I'm seeing a spike in ibuprofen cases, and I note that these are due to gastric irritation, gastric ulceration, gastric hemorrhage. I might want to put in concomitant medications with other nonsteroidals or other drugs that have that type of adverse, see if there's a synergistic effect. You can also add in concomitant medications for another purpose. Let's say, for example, I see a spike in celecoxib and impaired renal function or acute kidney injury. I might want to put in concomitant medications such as insulin that would pull up cases where I have known diabetic patients, and I can see if the adverse event profile changes there. I have the ability to look at all cases or serious or not. And we're always concerned with looking at age groups and where are our adverse events occurring. So we've broken it out into multiple age groups that you'll be able to select either here or on other reports. And what's really nice about it is if you set these filters here, then they will be applied to the other reports. So let's get rid of some of this back here where we're not really seeing anything, and all I do is I change the slider bar. If I want to add in anything here, all I have to do is click apply, and that you'll see that the data will refresh. Okay. So now we're looking at 2016, 2017. The other feature that's really nice about this is if you want to look at something in a larger scale, each of these windows has the ability to expand and contract. And each of these you can export. You can export it as PDF with your time and date stamp. Or if you like to use Excel and some of these can go into an Excel format, you can do that. So I'm able to expand and contract here. And then down here, by default, you see the 5 most common adverse events per year. And by just looking at this, if you know your product well, you can tell whether or not there's been a change. And again, remember this is total dummy data. What I'm seeing here for ibuprofen is a little bit unusual. I'm seeing, and let's pretend that I have not seen this before. One of my common adverse events that I'm not used to seeing now is spontaneous abortion. So already my flag is up. It's not red, but I want to look at that and I want to see what's going on. On this other screen, what's really nice is it shows all of your adverse events, and again, it does it by year, and in alphabetical order you have your PT terms, and it will give you the actual adverse event count. And again, using this you can export your data, or if you would prefer, you can actually share your data with others in your group if you find something that that you want to share. So that's a really nice feature. So not everybody has to go in and look at the same thing, and you don't have to always look at a flat report with just numbers. So I want to, let's say for example, I'm interested in celecoxib and what's happened between 18 and 19 that I'm seeing this. So you have the ability to click here on a time point, and by using the control key I can also click here. And now all I'm looking at is celecoxib for 2018 and 2019, and it's also displaying all of the adverse event by number across these 2 years. Now the actual numbers don't really, they are important, but remember we normalize them into reporting rates. Usually it's the number of adverse events divided by the doses distributed. So that's what gives you your reporting rate. And I see for celecoxib that my common adverse events are lack of efficacy or drug ineffective, drug hypersensitivity, and pruritus. And these are not really surprising. If you think about nonsteroidals in general, they are one of the more common groups of drugs that cause allergic reactions, so I'm not really surprised there. But I am a little bit concerned about this ibuprofen. So I'm going to take a look at, I can take a look here and see what comes up, and you see that I am seeing spontaneous 61 of those adverse events that has been reported in 2019. Drug hypersensitivity, drug ineffective, we're used to seeing. Intentional product misuse, I probably want to take a look at that and see what's going on here. Even though that may be common, I may want to see what that misuse profile looks like. So this is the first report. And then if I want to really look at the adverse events, I want to take a class. This is everybody in my family calls it the tachygypsy because I like a lot of colors, but I think that the color bars here actually are very helpful. So what we're seeing, again, on the top, we've got all of our information about when our data was refreshed. You see that we still have the ability to scroll across for different reports. We still have the ability to granulate down to months, weeks, or days. And we still have the features here if we want to granulate down even further. So so let's take a look. I see that there has been, again, this is data that is false, not false, it's pretend data. I see in 2019, look here, I've got an increase in the number of adverse events for both ibuprofen and for celecoxib. And by just hovering over this is one of the coolest things. You can basically take a quick look and you can say, oh, here's my drug hypersensitivity. I had 98 of those adverse events that were reported. And if I want to do a comparison, I've got the same with ibuprofen. And even though you may not see, there may be some small numbers that you can scroll through here and look at some of the less frequent adverse events. But I also see a yellow, which is my lack of efficacy. And I also see my spontaneous abortions. And the same thing with ramipril. There's, again, just because of the way that the data has been loaded, most of these are going to be very small numbers, but I still have the ability to pull these out. And then the PTs that are within all of these are listed here. Down at the left-hand corner, if I'm just, let's say that I just wanted to look at 2019, all I have to do is just click on that. That gives me, I'll have celecoxib, I'll have ibuprofen, and I'll have ramipril, and again, it will give me a listing. But now I can start looking at age groups, and I see that, let's take a look. If I hover here, I see that almost half of the adverse events were reported in patients less than 18 years old. So I might want to pull that out specifically and only look at the adverse events that are in children, and I can do that with PV-Hawk. That's very simple. Or I can go over here and I can change. Let's say, for example, I want to look only at ibuprofen. Okay. Sorry, I want to look only at, let's say that I wanted to look only at a particular event. So I'm looking, let's look at something that has some substantial numbers. So let's look at drug hypersensitive or drug ineffective. I see that I have, a pretty good age distribution. Still, again, most of those reports are coming from less than 18 years of age. Let's look and see if I go back. if I just go back and I want to look at all of that, let's say that I just want to look at 2019 for all products. And I would like to see what the adverse event profile looks like for drugs, for these drugs that were used for osteoarthritis. I can click here and I can hit apply, and my whole adverse event profile is going to change. Wow, look at that. Sorry, we're having bad weather in North Carolina, so occasionally I get that internet. But look at how my adverse event profile changed when I just look at cases that were where the drug was used for osteoarthritis. I don't see that spontaneous abortion anymore here. But what I am seeing is intentional misuse. We can click on that and we can see that that was in patients 75 years or older, and I only had really one. But you have the ability to look at each one of these if you'd like. You can also, if let's say that I only want to see the serious cases in osteoarthritis. So we'll go down here and we'll click only yes, and we'll hit apply. And again, we'll find that the data is refreshed. I had no serious cases for ibuprofen, but I see that these cases, for one reason or the other, were considered to be serious within my database. And I can reset by removing this. So I'll click all again, and then I hit apply. And the data should refresh, and I still have the ability, we're back to where we started, I still have the ability to go and to expand and contract. This makes it a little bit easier to see sometimes, and I can share through either here or through those buttons. I want to skip, these two are a little bit more time intensive, and we'll make sure we're able to cover these two reports, but let me show you what cases by country looks like, because I think this is kind of cool. So whatever drugs that you have selected, when you click on cases by country, it will actually show you through these bubbles where your cases are coming from. And this gives you some insight into your products as well. I see in the United States that most of my adverse events for my products that I'm looking at are coming from ibuprofen and celecoxib. If I skip over here to Japan, I see most of them are coming from celecoxib. And remember, we're starting to really dig down into the nerdy part of PV. I call it the art combined with the science. But we're starting to look at pharmacogenomics. So we may have a product launch that's in a new area, such as Italy. I just got approved for my product to be marketed in Italy. I may want to take a look and see what's going on very quickly in there. So how you go about changing from one report to the other is quite up to you and what makes sense to you. What I'm showing you is sort of how I would go around. I would go about doing some basic surveillance. And of course, I can't show you everything in a short period of time, but this is what this graphic looks like. And again, it's really nice because it tells you what's going on in Canada. It tells you what's going on, I can see in the United Kingdom that it's ibuprofen and ramipril, not a whole lot of celecoxib. What I would not want to see is, let's say, for example, my product was not marketed in Australia. I wouldn't want to see a bubble there. Here's where that might cause some flags. And you have the ability to scroll in or scroll out on your map. You have the ability again to any kind of granularity here, and I'm right here by months, or I'm sorry, by years. I can also use my drill down features for time as well. So I want to show you the overlay data because this is where it gets really, really cool. So what I've done, you can see immediately that it's very busy. There's a lot of data here. So I probably am never going to look at all products all together, because it's actually just, it's too much for me at least to digest. So I want to look just at the FDA ibuprofen, and I also want to look at my ibuprofen. Or let's take a look at Ramipril, since it seems to be a little bit easier for me to click on with my hands. Okay, so I've got FDA Ramipril, and I've also got my company's Ramipril. Both of those have increased in the same year, and I see FDA Ramipril. I see what they're seeing. They're seeing an increase in cases. Here is their profile. And if I want to really look and see what I can do, is I can see for 2019, and I can do this across all years, what I can see is what my company, what my adverse event profile looks like. So I've got dehydration for FDA is actually seeing 10, so I'm not too concerned. But remember where I was chasing ibuprofen, and I saw that spontaneous abortion. One of the ways that I can quickly do this is just I can do ibuprofen, and I can apply that only. So now this is exactly what I'm looking for. So I'm only comparing my ibuprofen to FDA's ibuprofen, and I see both that in 18 and 19, FDA saw an increase and I saw an increase. But look at the head-to-head comparison. FDA is showing acute kidney injury. We're both showing drug hypersensitivity. We're both showing drug ineffective. But remember, I was looking for a couple of other differences, and I can quickly go through here and I can just say, okay, so for blood pressure decreased, FDA has more. We're seeing kind of the same profile. What I would be interested in is if I'm seeing something in FDA or the comparator data, whatever it may be, is not. And you can see chest pain here. I'm trying to find something. I've got one case of cardiovascular insufficiency. That's with FDA, but not with me. And I can continue down the line looking for any differences between the data. And I can actually download this and look at it more. I can also add indication. I can add seriousness. There's a whole bunch of different things that we really don't have time to do. If I want to take a quick look at celecoxib, what I'll do is I'll delete this, and I'll add celecoxib here, and then we'll apply. And lo and behold, I can look at celecoxib. And my adverse event profile looks very similar, except that FDA had more reports of pain than I did. And let's take a look at here. And again, you have this nice graph that shows your company compared to FDA. And all of this is in alphabetical order by PTs, and you're able to share that or to download it if you like. I can also add in comparator data here. So if I also want to add in, let's say I wanted to compare celecoxib with acetaminophen and hydrocodone. Now, I don't market that, so what I'm going to be looking at would be celecoxib against FDA celecoxib, and then I'm going to look at how my celecoxib compares to, perhaps I'm looking for risk-benefit. And while I don't market a acetaminophen in combination with an opioid, I may want to look at the adverse event profile for these and see if they're similar or if they're different. And I may also want to look at efficacy. So what I see here is with celecoxib and FDA, and I can pull over here and open this up, and I can see the risk-benefit. I can start looking at risk-benefit with either drugs that are same in class or drugs that are same indication, if that makes sense. And I can't see y'all and I can't hear y'all, so I'm trying to imagine what your faces might be saying or what questions you may have. But this is a really nice way to be able to do some risk-benefit, and you can actually even look for indication. You can start drilling down and you can compare to acetaminophen only or acetaminophen and codeine, or acetaminophen with hydrocodone for dental pain, for example. How does my drug compare head-to-head for a particular indication by using all of these granular type drill down features? So let's reset because we still have one more, we still have one more, we have one more graph that I want to show you before we turn it over to questions. And that is the trending graph. And I find this to be extraordinarily helpful too if I don't get overwhelmed. So what you're looking at is, this is the only graph that you'll see where you have only one display. And you're looking at all of your drugs, celecoxib, ibuprofen, and ramipril. And you're looking at all of the adverse events. This is, to me, overwhelming. I mean, it's great. All the information is there, and I can sit there and look at that. But, you know, maybe I'm only interested in looking at ramipril. So I can click over here, and now I can look at what the adverse events are trending by year. And I see that, you know, I'm getting an increase here, but boy, these ones right here, which is hypotension, acute kidney injury, and hypertensive crisis, seem to stand out. If I want to just look at those three, or if I'm particularly interested in an adverse event, I can type it in here rather than all. I can type it in here and do a search function, and I can only pull up those particular adverse events. And so let's say that I want to look only at hypotension. Okay, we'll take hypotension. Whoops. We'll take that for sure, and we'll go with that for ramipril. Or we can go with, we can actually go with all. And I can drill down and I can look at this. I can also change for indication. Let's say that I'm looking, sorry, this is for ramipril. There we go. And I can also search by indication. So if I'm looking for hypertension, I want to see only the cases for essential hypertension, for example. I can apply that, and then I can look at the adverse events and see if I'm seeing that. And you see how, and again, this is just because of the data, you see that when I look at the trends of adverse events just for patients or just for the indication of essential hypertension, all I'm really seeing is acute kidney injury, and I'm seeing just one of discolored sputum, which is not a nice thing to talk about at this time of the day, but we can reapply that and we can come back and we can add in, do the same thing for celecoxib, where we look only at celecoxib, and I see that my biggest increase is from 18 to 19, and that's for drug hypersensitivity. So let's click here. And then maybe take a look at what this looks like over months. So if you have, for example, a vaccine, and you're looking, let's say, for example, you market influenza vaccine, or you market any vaccine, and you have a seasonal drug, for example. It could be an antihistamine, which is, spring, typically spring and fall, unless you live in the South where it's always allergy season. You can also look and see where you're spiking up in terms of months. That can actually help you with workflow management. It can also help you to just verify that your particular product is being used seasonally as you would expect. For example, if I market an over-the-counter cold and flu, I would look for my product to increase, from about September through April, depending on what area, and that would let me know also that I need more people, or I need to make my PV process more efficient to take care of all those cases. In this particular display, this could also mean that perhaps I'm seeing a spike during this period in adverse events. Maybe it's not a seasonal effect. Maybe I have a product quality issue, which is why my adverse events are increasing here. So you can kind of see what the thought process is on how you go about looking at your data in a meaningful way. We're going to go back to just the first graph, which is cases by product. And we're going to, I just want to review real quickly. So you go in and you select the products from whatever, if you have 100 products, you may not want to look at them all at one time. You may want to look at groupings of products. Or if you only have 4 or 5, you just put them in. Whatever is in your database is going to be available, and you select that as you log in. You can also select which drugs from the FDA AERS data that you want to have available for your overlay. So if I want to compare same in class, or if I want to compare same indication, even though the mechanisms of action may be different and I want to look at risk-benefit, I set that up at the very beginning. So here are my core reports, which are the number of cases by product, the number of AEs by product, the overlay graph with, at this point, AERS data, the trending of those adverse events, and then geographically, and then my drill down here, and my drill down functions here. So I think I'm probably at the 45-minute mark. So we'll go back to Q&A if we have any.
So I am going to ask the questions as they were asked. So forgive me if there's a little bit of confusion. And they were asked throughout the presentation, so please forgive that part as well. So first question is, how often is AERS downloaded?
I'm sorry, how often is
FAERS downloaded?
Oh, FAERS is downloaded as it's released. We probably do not have the most recent FAERS in this demo database, but I believe the FAERS data, if I'm not wrong, is a quarterly release, and so we would upload that as part of the SaaS offering. We would upload that and update that every quarter.
Awesome. Can you filter by specific groups of PTs rather than seeing all PTs?
Yes, you can. That's one of the drill down functions that you have. Unfortunately, I don't think we have time to be able to go through that. But if you want to see how that works, I'm happy to set up, some individual time, and you can absolutely look for specific PTs.
Okay. Can you demonstrate how we would look for signals of disproportionate analysis?
Disproportionate analysis is there are no statistics that are currently built in. It's in the roadmap for PVHawk, but what I would look for would be something like here is a great example. I'm seeing in order for me to look for disproportionality, I really have to know my product to begin with. And that may take some time if it's a new product. I know ibuprofen, it's been my product forever. I'm not going to say I'm old enough to remember when it was actually over the counter, because then y'all would know how old I was, and we don't talk about that in the South. But right here I see something that's very disproportionate according to, it's not consistent with what I've seen over time. Particular spontaneous abortions. So that's one of the ways that you can find it. You can also go to your AEs by product, and you can actually see where you have large chunks of these color blocks, and here's where you would start with your disproportionality. And I see that I've got 61, and they're all occurring in less than 18-year-old patients. That's a little bit weird to me. So here, this is where I would start looking for disproportionate reporting, if that makes sense.
Awesome. How many types of users, groups, / roles does PVHawk support?
Any. You can, it's up to you as a PVHawk user to give access to PVHawk. We just were at a medical device conference in the fall in Rome talking about the new upcoming MDR regulations in Europe. And this is just an example. So we have for a particular company, we had there was a lot of confusion on who was going to look at what data. So we had a combination product. So we had part of it was a device, part of it was a drug, and then we had the intermediary who was the lab that was making sure that there was no issues with the actual drug coming in contact with the delivery device. All three of those different entities, so the maker of the device, the maker of the drug, the lab that was looking at the stability of the drug in contact with the delivery device, and the marketing authorization holder are now responsible for this more iterative risk management system. This is a perfect solution for all four of them because they're all looking at the same data. They may be looking at different data points, but they're all seeing the same data at the same time. So if there is like an increase, for example, it's in perhaps stinging and burning at the injection site, the manufacturer of the actual drug may look at that and start saying, okay, is there some kind of product quality issue? The person who is looking at the device might say, well, have we changed the needle? Is there something that's happening here? Or the person who is looking at the stability may say, well, maybe there's a change with contact with the device, and I might need to analyze to see if the pH changes. So that's kind of a very detailed example, but that's the way that you could use it in that scenario. You could use it in the pharma world where marketing is happening. They're looking at it because they're going to launch a new marketing campaign where they're going to give a coupon for 3 months use of the drug if it's very expensive, for example. And they may want to be monitoring the number of cases that are coming in. You could use it in an intake system where your medical intake group may be looking at the number of cases that come in. So it's really versatile, and it's only limited by your imagination and what your needs are within your organization.
Awesome, thank you. Does the system support medical devices and combination products or just pharmaceuticals?
Oh, great question. It supports all of it. So if you're a medical device only, yes, it will support it. If you have combination products, yes, it will support it. If you have OTC or cosmetics or nutraceuticals, the platform will support it. No problem there.
Okay, thank you. Can you show me again an example of a risk-benefit comparison?
Sure. So let's go to the overlay graph. And let's do ibuprofen. Let's do ibuprofen only. Whoops. Let's do ibuprofen only, and let's take a look at ibuprofen. Okay, so now what I've done is I'm looking at the data from FDA, and I'm looking at the data from my company. And I see that my adverse event profile looks pretty similar to FDA's, but I want to see how my adverse event profile compares perhaps to acetaminophen and hydrocodone. So I want to look at the adverse event profile for that. So now it's added in acetaminophen and hydrocodone, and I'm going to totally make this up. We're gonna just take a look at this, and let's say that I'm looking for drug-induced injury. I want to see if ibuprofen may be harder on the liver than the combination of acetaminophen and hydrocodone. So I look over here, and I see that my ibuprofen has 1 case of drug-induced liver injury, and I see that I have none for acetaminophen and hydrocodone, and FDA has 13. So right here, and remember that these numbers would be much bigger in real life. Right here, and I know one N of 1 doesn't really mean anything, but let's just pretend, just as an example, right here, I might start looking and saying, well, you know what? For side effect profile, as far as liver injury is concerned, or if I have a patient who has compromised hepatic function, my drug might be a little bit better than this particular analgesic, which has different mechanisms of action. And I can look down here. I'm trying to find one where there's here we go, dyspepsia. This is a great one because this actually makes pharmacological sense. I see that my company has 4 times more adverse events of dyspepsia or upset stomach, and that totally goes with the mechanism of action of ibuprofen. But I see that that the data for hydrocodone and acetaminophen is more favorable incidence of upset stomach or dyspepsia. So if you have somebody that is intolerant to nonsteroidals because they've got a gastric ulcer or they have a history of non-tolerance for nonsteroidals, this might be a better risk profile for that type of patient than using ibuprofen. And we won't go into the risks here that we know are associated with some of the opioids, but looking at particular things like this gives you a sense of that risk benefit. I hope that answers your question.
Awesome. So I'll give one more question just because we're almost at the end. Does it support call center data?
It does. Actually, the way the technology, I won't go into that too much, but the way that the technology is set up. So, for example, let's say that you are a poison control center and you're getting a ton of calls, or you're a call center and you may be getting lots of different data. You can actually have PV-Hawk that sits in there, and you can do all of these things that I've showed you with your call center data. We can set it up for you, and with the SaaS model, you actually again are able to request your own reports, a set number per year, and you get that library, which is constantly growing. So you can use it for a call center. You can use it just about everywhere that's in your PV system.
Perfect. Thank you. So that brings us to the end of our webinar. If you have other questions that you'd like to ask, feel free to reach out to Kari directly. Her email is in the chat. You can also fill out the contact us form on Perficient's website. Keep in mind that we will be sending the webinar deck and recording in the next couple of days. And again, feel free to reach out if you have any questions or would like to have a personalized demo. Thank you so much for everyone joining today. We hope that the information Kari provided you with today was helpful. Have a great rest of the day and evening.